بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. My dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I want to start off with something that we all know, but perhaps we don't pay attention to. So building off the introduction that we just had by a wonderful Shaykh on success, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He calls us out to success every single day. In fact, multiple times a day. In fact, 10 times a day, if not more than that, just within any one masjid. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He taught Bilal radiallahu anhu to give the adhan, and in it to say, Hayya ala al-falah. Come to success. Run to success. That is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every single day. Yet how many of us take heed when we hear that statement? When we hear that statement, what comes to our mind? What do we think of as success? Bidhnillahi ta'ala, in my session today, that's what I'd like to focus on. When we think of success, what comes to mind? And how do we answer this call of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He says, hurry to success? So to give you the conclusion at the very beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in the Quran what success actually looks like. He says, فَمَنْ زُحْزِهَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ. That whoever is able to save themselves from the hellfire and to be entered into paradise, then they are the successful ones. They have truly achieved success. Now, how do we get to that spot? How do we make sure that we are from those people that are saved from the fire and entered into paradise? Well, let's go to chapter number 23 in the Quran. Who can tell me what chapter number 23 in the Quran is? Who knows? Surah Al-Mu'minun, the chapter of the believers. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in this chapter, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, that indeed the believers will be successful. Indeed the believers will be successful. So a condition of our success is having iman. And I love what the Shaykh said in his introduction, that if you do not have Islam, if you do not have faith, there is no success. You could have $1 billion, you could have the fanciest cars, you could have the biggest house, you could have everything in this dunya. But if you don't have Islam, it's all worthless at the end of the day. So our first definition of success, or the first pillar of success that we look at, is that if you have Islam, you have success. Because eventually you will be successful. Not right away, but eventually you will be successful. So what can we do if we want to be successful right off the bat? You want to be successful right off the bat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in this very surah that they are the ones who have serenity and tranquility in their prayer. They have khushu' in their salah. Now when you think about khushu' in your salah, I'm wondering why this is. If you think about khushu' in salah, the focus is not on the serenity and the tranquility, but the focus is on the ability to focus and to have a deep level of focus on what you're doing. So if you're engaged in salah right now, you're focused on that. If you're at work, you're focused on that. If you're with your family, you're focusing on them, and you're not distracted. And this ties into the very next verse when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that they also turn away from idle speech, from vain talk. They turn away from it, meaning that they're not distracted. And we're going to come back to this section in terms of focus. But what I want to focus on right now is when we think about success in this life, we often equate it with money. The more money you have, the more successful you are. The more money you have, the more successful you are. So now let's look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala portrays wealth in the Quran, and then I want to pose a question to you. So one portrayal of wealth Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us in the Quran, He tells us, Al-Malu wal-Banun. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in the Quran, Al-Malu wal-Banun zinatul hayatid dunya, that your wealth and your children are an adornment for you in the life of this world. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us another perspective. He tells us, إِنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ فِتْنَةٌ, that indeed your wealth and your children are a trial for you. So be very careful as to how you tread with them. So now you've heard both perspectives, and let me ask you a question. If you believe wealth is a good thing, raise your hands please. If wealth is a good thing, raise your hands. Okay, thank you very much. Hands down. And if you believe wealth is a bad thing, raise your hands. Wealth is a bad thing, raise your hands. Man, some of you are raising your hands twice. You can't do that. Okay, so we have both perspectives. Jazakallah khair. So let's build on what is the ideal case scenario. What is the ideal case scenario? If you have been to Al-Masjid al-Nabawi, in the front of the masjid you have this area that's elevated. It's an elevated platform in the front of the masjid. And that's where the poor companions used to live. They were known as Ahl al-Sufra. And these poor companions, they came complaining to the Prophet ﷺ one day, and they said, Ya Rasulullah, ذهب أهل الدثور بالأجور. The rich companions amongst us, they run away with all of the reward. They pray just like we pray, they fast just like we fast, but they give in sadaqah that which we cannot give. So teach us something that if we were to do it, it would put us at par with them, meaning make us equal with them. So at that time, the Prophet ﷺ, in the version of Sahih Muslim, he tells them to say Subhanallah 33 times, Alhamdulillah 33 times, and Allahu Akbar 33 times at the end of every salah. And he says, no one will come better than you on the day of judgment except the one that did this and more. Now, as was the trait of the people of Medina, as soon as knowledge is revealed, they shared amongst themselves. So no sooner did the Prophet ﷺ say this, except all of the companions found out. So the poor companions, they come back and they say, Ya Rasulullah, they found out our secret, teach us something more. And at that time, the Prophet ﷺ puts things into perspective for us. He says, ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُعْطِيهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. That is the favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives to whomever He pleases. So what that teaches us, the ideal case scenario is that you are a believer that has been possessed with wealth, that does their personal ibadah, and they spend their money in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the ideal case scenario. So when you look at personal Islamic finance, the number one rule of personal Islamic finance is that your iman has to be higher than your finances. Your iman has to be higher than your finances. Why is that important? Because if your iman isn't higher than your finances, you will be willing to compromise on where you get your wealth from, and you'll be willing to compromise on how you spend it. And we cannot allow that to happen. Why? Because we are primarily people of the akhirah before we are people of the dunya. So we use this dunya to get to the akhirah, and we don't make this dunya the end all of all things. It's just a means. It is just a means. So the wealth that we have, the ideal case scenario is that you have iman, you're doing your personal ibadah, you're wealthy, and you're spending that money in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the ideal case scenario. So now let's look at what Imam Ahmad rahimahullah says about the likes of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Abdurrahman ibn Auf and Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu anhum ajma'in. He was asked, how was it that these people were from the richest of people, yet they were still promised paradise in their lifetime? Like, aren't the rich people all evil? Aren't they all terrible? That's generally what we perceive of people that are wealthy, that their wealth will corrupt them. Yet these very people were so righteous that they were promised paradise in their lifetime. So Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he comments on them by saying that they were people that learned a special secret from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that was to never let wealth reach your heart. Never let wealth reach your heart. So if Allah gives you money, you spend it in His case, and He'll give it back to you and much, much more. And we see that throughout their lives, subhanAllah. Anytime there's an incident where the Prophet ﷺ needed money, they spent in the way of Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them back much, much more. SubhanAllah, at one time, Uthman ibn Affan giving 400 camels worth in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him back so much more. So now when we think of this, is that wealth is not meant to reach our heart. So what does wealth actually do then? What does wealth actually do? Wealth is a magnifying glass. If the heart is pure, it will magnify the purity. If the heart is corrupt, it will magnify the corruption. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us time and time again to focus on the state of the heart and focus on the actions that we do. And thus He tells us, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعْ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. That on that day our wealth will not avail us, our children will not avail us, except for those that come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a pure heart. So if your heart is pure, your wealth and your children, there will be a proof for you. But if the heart is corrupt, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that, then the wealth and the children will be a proof against us. they will be a proof against us. So let us not frame his wealth good or bad. It is just a means, it is just a vehicle. It is the one who is in control of that wealth that will dictate what that wealth does in terms of being a proof for or a proof against. So now if you look at this attitude of wealth, are Muslims meant to seek wealth now? Are we actually meant to do that? Well, let's go into a beautiful story in Kitab al-Nikah of Sahih Bukhari. So Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu, he was from the Muhajirun. He was from those that migrated from Mecca to Medina. And when he migrated from Mecca to Medina, he left everything behind. His family, his buildings, his property, everything that he had. And he comes into Medina now, and the Prophet ﷺ has paired him with a man by the name of Sa'ad ibn Rabi'a, just so that the Ansar will help out the Muhajirun. They got paired together. And Sa'ad ibn Rabi'a, he tells Abdurrahman ibn Auf that I have two businesses, take any one of my two businesses. I have two houses, take any one of my two houses. And this was before the rulings of Nikah and Talaq were revealed. He said, I have two wives, I will divorce my wife and you can take her, anyone that you want. And subhanAllah, I want you to focus over here on the proposal and then the response. For the proposal, Sa'ad ibn Rabi'a knows nothing about Abdurrahman ibn Auf other than the fact that this man loves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And just due to that fact, he was willing to give him everything that he had in half. Everything that he had, split right in the middle, it is yours. And subhanAllah, that is the impact on Iman, that for the sake of Allah, we're willing to give it away, because we know that this is Allah's property. It doesn't belong to us, it's just a trust with us. This belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and thus he was willing to give it away. Now I want you to think about this. Someone comes up to you and says, I have an established business, I'll let you have it. I have this built house, I'll let you have it. What is your response going to be? We may think, where do I sign? Hook me up right away. Let's not delay this. Before you change your mind, give it to me, right? That is the attitude that we may have. But what does Abdurrahman ibn Auf teach us about the prophetic mentality with regards to wealth? Abdurrahman ibn Auf responds, show me where the marketplace is. Show me where the marketplace is. Meaning that you work hard for your money. It's okay to take a handle when you need it, when you're incapable of working for yourself. But that's not the attitude you want to develop. That's not the attitude you want to develop. You want to work hard for your money. So now look at how the story continues. Abdurrahman ibn Auf, he goes to the marketplace, starts trading with dried yogurt. And he becomes successful. How successful? Well, one day he's walking by the Prophet ﷺ, and there's a yellow stain on his shirt. And the Prophet ﷺ asks him, where did this stain come from? He says, Ya Rasulullah, I got married yesterday. And then the Prophet ﷺ asks him, what did you give her as a dowry? He says, I gave her some gold. And then the Prophet ﷺ commands him, that go and sacrifice a sheep and a goat and celebrate with the people. Make your marriage known, do not hide it. This is what the Prophet ﷺ commanded him. And this shows us that when you put your trust in Allah and you're willing to work hard, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you the money. The money is never the challenge. Getting money is never the challenge. The challenge is how do you prevent that money from corrupting you? How do you prevent that money from corrupting you? So this answers another question we may be thinking in our heads, that as people of the Akhirah, doesn't that mean that we just sit in the masjid, pray 5 times a day, and make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Isn't that all we're supposed to do? No, not at all. Not at all. The Prophet ﷺ, he tells us that if you were to truly trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, trust that He is truly deserving of, He would provide for you like the bird. And what does the bird do? Does the bird just stay in its nest hoping that the worm's going to land in its nest? Not at all. The Prophet ﷺ tells us that it leaves its nest hungry early in the morning and comes back with its stomach full. And comes back with its stomach full. Now I want us to focus on this example just for one brief moment. If you have any animal that is in its natural ecosystem, and that ecosystem has not been adulterated by the presence of human beings, have you ever heard of an animal dying of hunger? Have you ever heard of an animal dying of hunger in this natural habitat and ecosystem? You don't. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created enough rizq for all of His creation. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, that if He was to provide for all of mankind and all of the jinn everything that they want, Every single thing that they want, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to all of mankind and all of the jinn, it would be like dipping a needle in the ocean and the water that it extracts. Barely anything. How much water would that needle extract? Barely anything, just a droplet, if anything, right? That is how much impact it would have on the kingdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was to answer everyone's du'as. So my dear brothers and sisters, the focus and the priority should never be wealth. Wealth will come and go. It is your iman that you want to focus on. As long as you're willing to try hard and work hard and take the right steps, the wealth will come bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created enough wealth for everyone. Now this leads me to my second point, that once you've figured out how to navigate through wealth, once you've figured out how to protect your heart from being corrupted when you have wealth, let's talk about focus. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention those people that have khushu' in their salah and those people that turn away from vain and idle speech? Because you're too busy working to make this world a better place. So when we think about success, yes, people that pray 5 times a day will be successful. But people that pray 5 times a day and they work at bettering the world will be even more successful. So success is not just, you get 60% and you've passed. You want to get to 100%. Why do we ask for that 100%? Because the Prophet ﷺ tells us that if you were to ask Allah for Jannah, ask Allah for Al-Firdaus, the highest of Jannah. So don't ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just for Jannah, but ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Al-Firdaus, the highest of Jannah. So what that means is, the deeds that you do should not just be to enter Jannah, but the deeds that you want to be doing should be so that they get you to Al-Firdaus. Because the du'as that you make need to coincide with the actions that you do. The du'as that you make need to coincide with the actions that you do. Du'a is a spiritual means to attain your goal. The action that you do is the physical means. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides the results. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides the results. So now when you think about this concept of focus, that is what every individual needs to do, to sit down and to think, what is my role in this dunya? How am I going to make this world a better place? And this is where you truly need to have a conversation with yourself. Outside of, what your friends are saying, outside of even what your parents are saying. And I say this with the utmost respect, being brought up in a very cultural Indian Pakistani household, where I had 3 options for my education. I could become an accountant, I could become a doctor, or I could become an engineer. That was it. Those were my 3 options. But my heart didn't lie in any of those things. I didn't want any of those things for myself. So no matter how many Kumon classes you sent me to and tried to force me to become an accountant, it wasn't what I wanted. And eventually, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened my door and showed me my path, that this is what I'm meant to do. So I say this, that you yourself will know where your heart lies. What is your heart naturally, calling to? Is it helping people? Is it, art? Is it literature? Is it, construction? Whatever it may be. Each and every one of us has our callings. But you have to have that conversation with your hearts to figure that out. Because sometimes our hearts and our minds get so polluted with the things that we get exposed to. Oh, I want to become a TikTok influencer. And you're like, yeah, and that's what I'm going to do. And I understand, right now, for a couple of years, you make money off of TikTok. But what are you going to do after? Like when you have to submit a resume, what are you going to put on your resume? From 2022 to 2025, I was a TikTok influencer. Like what type of job are you going to get after that? Now this is not to put social media influencing down. Do it as a side hustle, do it as a side gig, no problem. But focus on contributing to the dunya, on making this world a better place. And that's what you need to prioritize and to focus on. So look at your calling and look at where your passion lies. Once you've figured that out, find the best people in that industry in your city. Connect with them. Approach them. Ask them to mentor you. Ask them to help you. Ask them, what can I do to become from amongst the best in this field? Why from amongst the best? Because once you become the best, there's nowhere to look except down. And we don't want to look down. We were taught to be from amongst the best. We all want to enter into Jannah together. Al-Firdaus has enough space for all of us. It's not just one person's domain. So we want to be from amongst the best so that we don't go down upon people and that we're all in this journey together helping one another. So you figured out your calling, you found the people that are successful, you ask them to help you and guide you and mentor you. And then at the same time, you invest in your education. You know, something that I've been dabbling in since like early pandemic was this concept of investing, particularly from an Islamic perspective. And one of the beautiful statements that I came across was from Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, in my opinion, has been the most successful investor throughout history. This one man, his ability to turn thousands into billions of dollars, subhanAllah, over a long period of time. So he was a successful investor. And when he was asked by a university student, if I had $10,000 to invest, what should I invest it in? What did he say? Did he say Apple? Did he say Google? Did he say Tesla? He didn't say any of those companies. He said invest in your own financial literacy. Invest in your ability to learn about finance and to understand how the economy works and understand how the stock market works and understand those things. So similarly for amongst yourselves, when you find what your calling is, educate yourself in that field. You know, there's this theory proposed recently by Malcolm Gladwell, at least from what I remember. He says that if you were to study a field for 10,000 hours, meaning you read about it, you study it, you expose yourself to it, you practice it for 10,000 hours, that will naturally put you in the top 5% of that field. That will naturally put you in the top 5% in that field. So you read, you study, you practice, you get mentored, and that is how you develop your career. Now, going back to this point that we've mentioned, what is the focus behind developing this career? Not for the sake of, you know, I'm CEO of this company. Not for the sake of, you know what, I have so much money and I have so much to show off of. That is never the goal. But the goal is that when you think about you passing away, how will people remember you? People will not remember how much wealth you had. People will not remember what type of car you drove. People will remember the impact that you made in their lives. People that didn't have access to water, if you were able to provide them water, they will remember that. People that were dying and needed surgery, if you were able to save their lives through that surgery, they will remember that. People that didn't have access to an education, if you're able to facilitate education for them, they will remember that. And that's what you're focusing on. That it is all just a means to get to Al-Firdaus. It is all just a means to get to Al-Firdaus. Now, one of the things that people strive for in this dunya is influence. So going back to my, asphyxiation with TikTok influencers. What is the point of influence? And I want us to focus on this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells in Surah Al-Furqan that the believers make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The believers make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What dua are they making to Allah? They're making dua to Allah, وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. That, oh Allah, make us an example for the muttaqun, for those that are conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oftentimes when we think of imam, we think that the imam is just the one that leads the salah. That is a type of imam. Why is it a type of imam? Because when the imam says Allahu Akbar, you say Allahu Akbar. When he goes down into ruku, you go down to ruku. When he goes down to sajda, you make sajda as well. So you're following him in what he is doing. So he's meant to be an example for you. So when you think about influence, the Quranic paradigm in regards to influence is to get people to follow you in righteousness. Is to get people to follow you in righteousness. And when you get authority and when you get power, the goal is not to be a dictator. The goal is not to be a dictator and tell people, hey, clean my shoes, or hey, go clean my office. That's not the point. The point is to help people be guided in the right direction. And oftentimes people don't contemplate this enough. But you know that famous statement of Spider-Man when he says, with great power comes great responsibility? That's actually a Islamic injunction. That there is no power except with responsibility and accountability. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives no people power and authority except that He will question them more on the Day of Judgment. The more power you have, the more authority you have, the more you will be questioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how do you save yourself from that reckoning and that questioning? that you use your power to guide people towards good, to influence them towards good. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he reminds all of us, you may be as young as 2 years old, or you can be 95 years old right now. He says, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ. That all of you are leaders and shepherds of your flocks, and all of you will be questioned. Meaning that there is no person in this room except that he has some sort of authority and some sort of power over someone. The middle sibling has power and authority over the youngest sibling. The parents have authority over their children. The imam has authority over his congregation. The president of the masjid has authority over the masjid. And you move your way all the way to the top till you get to the khalifa. So the more power and authority you have, the more you will be questioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why I want us to focus on this, that when it comes to this dunya, the more you get of it, the more likely you are to be questioned about it. ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. That on that day you will be questioned about these blessings. So don't always ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for more, but ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for better. Don't ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for more, but ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for better. Because if having more wealth will corrupt you, why would you want that? If having a high position will corrupt you, why would you want that? So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what is best for you. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what is best for you. And that is why the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam teaches us that from the best du'as that you can make is a dua that all of us know. And we need to get into the habit of saying it more frequently. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. That, oh Allah, grant us the best of this life. And it doesn't stop there. And grant us the best of the next. And it doesn't stop there. And save us from the punishment of the hellfire. So what does this dua show us? Well, remember at the beginning of the lecture when we were talking about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defined for us what success looks like? It is the individual that is saved from the hellfire and entered into paradise. And to be entered into paradise. And this is where I want to focus my last portion of my lecture, BDHalaqa ta'ala. That how does the Quran focus with motivation? That you're going to hit roadblocks where you're going to feel demotivated. You're going to find, moments in your life where you feel, you know what, I've had enough, I don't want to do this anymore. And subhanAllah, ask any imam. A lot of us are on the verge of being burnt out. But what is it that keeps us motivated? Or what is it that should keep us motivated? It is the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of paradise. And what's really fascinating is that when you look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses paradise and Jahannam in the Quran, they're very, very different and very, very distinct. The Quran, when it tells you about Jannah, it'll tell you a few things that you can relate to, that you recognize what they are. And then it lets your mind wander and ponder and reflect and long and hope. Whereas when it comes to Jahannam, it's very explicit, very vivid. Look at the hadith that talk about the punishment for various sins. They're all very, very graphic. They're meant to scare you. Why? Because when it comes to pleasure, the mind will naturally wander and reflect and desire. But when it comes to pain, the mind will naturally run away from it. It won't want anything to do with it. And thus Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to be very explicit, graphic and vivid in those descriptions. So now, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, لَهُمْ مَا يَشَاءُونَ فِيهَا وَلَدَيْنَا مَزِيدٌ, that they will have each and every single thing that they desire, and we will still have more to give them. What does that mean? How can you have every single thing that you desire, yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still has more to give you? How is that possible? Aren't we as human beings insatiable? In the life of this world, yes, we're insatiable. The children of Adam, if they were given one valley of gold, they would want a second. If they had a second, they would want a third, and nothing will satisfy them up until death itself. But when it comes to the hereafter, it's not about being insatiable. It is about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created an infinite amount of joy and pleasure. So you know how in the life of this world, if you're doing something really, really fun, think about whatever it is. Someone likes going to an amusement park, someone likes playing video games, someone likes playing sport. Eventually a time will come, you're like, enough, I need to move on to something else, I'm bored. But whereas when it comes to Jannah, it doesn't end. You will never get bored. The concept of boredom does not exist. And that's why simple things in the life of this world that may take a few moments, in the hereafter they last years. Like dinner is going to last years, and you're going to enjoy every single moment of it. Your companionship with your friends, you're going to be hanging out for decades and eons, and you're still going to be enjoying it. And that is what the life of the hereafter is all about. And I want to share a small little tip with you. That when you're looking for motivation, here's a little technique that I think is very, very valuable. I want you to take a blank piece of paper. Take a blank piece of paper, and then in it, draw what you think Jannah is going to look like for you. What you think Jannah is going to look like for you. And in fact, let's do a small exercise. Okay? It'll take 10 seconds maximum. So what I would like everyone here to do, for those of you that would like to participate, just close your eyes for 10 seconds. Close your eyes for 10 seconds. And in those 10 seconds, I want you to think about if you were in Jannah, what would you be doing right now? If you were in Jannah, what would you be doing right now? So close your eyes, and I'll count into 10 in my head, and I'll tell you when it's over. Close your eyes, guys. Okay, Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much. Open your eyes. And I'll tell you why I like doing this exercise so much. Because it teaches me a lot about people. So you have one group of people that they just stare at you like this. And those are the people like, you know what, no matter what you tell me, I'm not going to listen to you. And I'm like, that's fine. You know, you don't have to participate. No one's going to force you. And then you have the vast majority of people, their eyes are closed. Alhamdulillah, they listen. But what's almost sad, not completely sad, what's almost sad is that you're not smiling, you're not giggling, you're not shouting for joy. You just have like a small smirk maybe, or some of you are even frowning. And then I wonder what's happening in the Jannah that you're frowning. Right? As Shaykh Ali was telling us that the people, when they're given the books in their right hand, they're jumping for joy. They're jumping for joy that they've made it. And this shows us that Jannah is not a successful motivation for us because we haven't contemplated and pondered it enough. We haven't contemplated and pondered it enough. So now going back to this exercise, you have this blank canvas to draw in it whatever you want, and whenever you feel demotivated, you remind yourself, you know what, this is what I'm working for. And this is just a percentage of a percentage of a percentage of what the real Jannah is going to look like. So now I'll share the background to the story. The background to the story was when I was growing up in Montreal. That's not where I live right now. I live in Calgary. I've been there for 10 years now, alhamdulillah. When I was growing up in Montreal, my family were fresh immigrants. We had just moved to Canada literally 10 days before I was born. So a very new, family, wasn't very well off, just starting off. Parents are working, and I'm sent to this daycare in a very heavily immigrant population. And obviously being in that situation, even the daycare that I went to was very, very poor. So every Friday was meant to be fun day, which I really appreciated. But what are we doing every Friday? We're watching the exact same movie every single Friday. And what movie was that? It was the old Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Not the one with Johnny Depp, the old one, right? With the guy with the curly hair, subhanAllah. And I saw that every Friday without exaggeration for a whole entire year till we moved from that area. And in that movie, regardless of which version you've seen, there's that one scene where they finally get into the chocolate factory, into Willy Wonka's factory. And there's this one room where like the tree is made out of candy, and then you have like the Oompa Loompas that are there that are just like giving out whatever you want. But then you have this river of chocolate. And I remember that as I got older and I started reading the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps telling us, فِي جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِن تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ, that in paradise there are gardens underneath which rivers flow. I'm like, hey, is it possible to get a chocolate river? And then you come across a verse like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us, لَهُمْ مَا يَشَاءُونَ فِيهَا وَلَدَيْنَا مَزِيدٌ, that they will have each and every single thing that they desire, and we will still have more to give them. So the desire which you want is limitless. And that's what it teaches us, that if you want something, you may not get it in this dunya. There's no way I'm getting a chocolate over in this dunya. But if I work hard enough, if I'm patient enough, if I keep seeking mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah has mercy on me, then the possibilities in the hereafter are endless. So my canvas is about this chocolate river, where you're just floating on the river, you're going fishing. And you know, one of the difficult parts about fishing is actually catching the fish. And that's why the piece of fishing is not in catching the fish. If you catch a fish, alhamdulillah, that's like the icing on top. But just the act of fishing is very calm and stress releasing. So catching a fish is difficult, but in Jannah, you know what? The fish are coming up to your boat and they're like, Navaid, please catch him. Navaid, please catch him. And you catch them. And now, one of the difficult things is de-gutting the fish. Taking out the insides, taking out the bones. Who wants to do that in Jannah? And here's the kicker. Even the fish in Jannah are now made out of chocolate. You have your chocolate fish, you're out on your boat. But who wants to be in Jannah alone? So in the distance, you see your friends, they're playing volleyball, it's sunny, there's a cool breeze, it's like 22 degrees, and they're having a good time, they're out in the distance, and everyone's happy. And I highlight this because when you look at happiness in this world, true happiness will never exist. And we know this from experience. Because even if something good happens in your life, you know someone is going through a calamity and a catastrophe, directly or indirectly. There's some sort of calamity and catastrophe happening in the world that won't allow you to be truly happy. Whereas in Jannah, there's only happiness. No one is going through any calamity or going through any catastrophe, and all of your friends are happy. And obviously, you don't want to be in Jannah with just your friends. You want to be there with your family as well. So your family's in the distance, they're barbecuing, and everyone's laughing and giggling, remembering their times in this dunya. Perhaps where they fought over useless things, like who had a bigger house and who had a better car and who had more money. And they remember, what was that all worth? Who cares? We made it to Jannah. And that's what it's all about. And then you're just reclining on your boat with all of these nice sounds around you, with this beautiful fragrance and aroma, in this beautiful weather, waiting for the day of Friday. The day of Friday when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls the believers to the marketplace and He makes them even more beautiful than they were in the life of this world. You think you're good looking now? Wait till you get to Jannah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the ultimate gift. The ultimate gift in Jannah has nothing to do with what I've mentioned. Has nothing to do with anything that the average person will desire. And it has everything to do with the slave of Allah recognizing who his creator and sustainer is. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presents His beautiful face to the believers. And that is the ultimate gift in Jannah. And now you may think, subhanAllah, where is the gift in that? Well, this goes back to how well do we know Allah? How well do we know His paradise? How well do we know His punishment? And when we know those things, those are the ultimate motivators and detractors. When a person has this desire for committing sin, the remembrance of Jahannam will detract that pleasure and that desire that they have. And when a person is feeling demotivated and needs that motivation to do more, they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His reward and His paradise. And then you act like that man. That man that was on the battlefield and he's hungry, he's starving. And he knows he has to go out on the battlefield. And the Prophet ﷺ is commanding the believers out, but he has these dates in his hand. He has these dates in his hand, and he keeps looking at them and he keeps looking at the battlefield. Back and forth, back and forth. What should I do? I'm hungry, but I should be answering this call. And then he throws the dates behind him. And he says, if I live long enough to finish these dates, I would have lived a life too long. وَسَارِعُوا إِلَىٰ جَنَّةٍ. And race forward to Jannah. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us with. Let me do a quick recap of what we've taken. My dear brothers and sisters, when we think about success, success is to be free from the hellfire and to be entered into paradise. Part of being successful is having wealth, but understanding that wealth magnifies the state of the heart, and if it is pure, it will magnify the purity. If it is corrupt, it will magnify the corruption. So we have to focus on that pure heart. Money will come as long as you rely upon Allah and you work hard. What type of hard work should you be doing? Following that natural gift and passion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Learn, study, be mentored, make a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not for the sake of achieving a title and for having power and authority, but for making this world a better place. And when you hit those roadblocks and when you feel demotivated, remember Allah, remember His paradise. And as long as you do that, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we will be successful.